All right, take a look at, I want to get through a few points here today. Take a look at page 204. So at the bottom of 204, a very interesting concept now. The brothers sell Yosef, and then on page Pasuk Chaf Tes, at the bottom of page 204, a remarkable idea that I once heard. Vayeishev Ruvain al Abor, V'ne'ein Yosef babor vayikra es begodav. Ruvain comes back to the pit. Yosef's not there, and Ruvain rends his garments. So if you look at Rashi, Rashi says it's the left column, bottom line. Vayeishev Ruvain. Ruvain returns to the pit. Yosef's not there because the brother sold him. So that should beg the question, which Rashi touches on. Uvebechirasa lo hayasham. When Yosef was sold, he wasn't there. Shehigia yama of leilech l'shamesh es aviv, because it was Ruvain's turn to go home and attend to Yaakov Avinu. Apparently, they had a rotation. It was Ruvain's turn. Very providential, isn't it? The dafka that day was Ruvain's turn, where his whole plan was to go get Yosef, hide him in the pit, then go back and get him. Davar acher, there's another shot. Asuk haya besako v'taniso. Ruvain was busy with his sackcloth and fasting. Asher bilbel yitzuei aviv, because he had gotten involved in mixing up Yaakov's bed. Remember the incident where after Rachel died, so then Reuven got involved and he shifted around things. He moved the bed, Yaakov's bed around. So Rashi said, why wasn't he there? One of two reasons. Either because he was, what do you call it? He was attending to Yaakov Avinu, or is he doing me a favor? Close the door over there, okay? Either because he was attending to Yaakov Avinu, or because he was, what do you call it? He was fasting and he was in sackcloth. He went off to do some hisbodedus because of his what do you call it? His involvement in Yaakov Avinu, moving the beds around. That's what he said. Okay, so I once heard an interesting shot from Rav Daniel Lehrfield, the Rosh Yeshiva of Beis Yisrael. He said like this: isn't it what a coincidence? Reuven all of a sudden goes off, and he's decided to go and do tshuva, sackcloth and ashes, because of an incident that took place. If you make a calculation, that incident took place about close to 10 years earlier. The incident with the moving the beds. Why? Right, and he was there in the beginning. He was there when all this was happening. All of a sudden he goes off. Where is he going off to? He's going off to put on sackcloth and fast because of an incident that took place 10 years earlier. Why not now? What's going on? Why? So he said a really penetrating idea. You see, you have to ask the following question. The brothers are deciding over here, and the Chazal say they made a Beis Din. You can't just go and sell people, kidnap and sell people. You gotta, you're dealing with people's lives over here. The brothers paskind that Yosef is a rodef. Yosef's a rodef. Yosef's a pursuer. Why is he a pursuer? Because he's telling the father that they're guilty of what do you call it? Of severe averas. And maybe they're liable for the death penalty if the immorality charges are true. And if they're Noachide, a Noachide who sins is liable for the death penalty. There's only one punishment in Noachide law. A Noachide only has 7 mitzvahs. But if a Noachide transgresses one of these mitzvahs, so a Noachide is put to death. It's the only punishment by Noachide law. In Jewish law, if you steal, you have to pay. Sometimes you have to pay double. If you slaughter it and sell it, you have to pay 4 or 5 times as much. In Noachide law, so you have to, what do you call it? Noachide law, you have to, you're liable. If you steal, you die. So if Yosef's right on his charges and they have Noachide status, so if his charges are carried out, so and they claim that it's not true. So what is Yosef's din in halacha? What is Yosef's halachic status? He's a rodef, he's a pursuer. Well, if you're a pursuer, you deserve to die. Number one. Number two, maybe Yaakov Avinu will get upset. Yaakov will curse them. Hey, Yaakov's first. Yaakov give a gatoig over there. That carries some, put some teeth into it. So the brothers have a problem over here. Now, they assemble a Beis Din and they go through with, but he did. They got all the lumdus and the thumbs are flying, right? The thumbs are. Well, let me ask you a question. if they're doing it from a Torah perspective, who's the Gadol Hador? Who's the leading Torah sage of the generation? Yaakov. So why don't you consult with Yaakov Avinu? If you're right, so go consult. That's often an indication in life that you're not right. If you're afraid to ask, then you shouldn't be doing it. Yeah? Remember I told you sometimes they have a what do you call it? Sometimes a sale at the supermarket. You know, two per customer. You know, special on Coke. 2 cases per 2 cartons per customer. So you ask the guy behind you, could you take 2? I'll meet you out in the parking lot. You buy 2 also, I'll meet you in the parking lot. Is it okay to do that or not? So I got an idea. Just go ask the manager. No, they don't. Don't want to bother him. You don't want to bother him? You don't want to ask? That means you shouldn't be doing it. It's a rule in life. Sometimes you help yourself to stuff. You stay at a hotel and you help yourself to some souvenirs at the hotel. Doesn't that ever happen? Help yourself to a couple of souvenirs, a couple of packets, a couple of bars of soap, a couple of bottles of shampoo. Rip the TV out of the wall, right? Just a few souvenirs. Maybe take a mattress from the hotel. They got good mattresses. No, they don't mind. They want me to take it. They want me to take the towels. It's good advertisement for the hotel. Right? Yeah, that's always the oldest. Take the Holiday Inn towel because good advertisement for Holiday Inn. Exactly how you're going to advertise it with the towel hanging in your shower room at home. Well, you got a lot of people taking showers in your house. They advertise their Holiday Inn. No, I don't want to bother you. You don't want to ask, then you shouldn't be doing it. So why don't you ask Yaakov Avinu? So listen to this. This is unbelievable. Under normal circumstances, perhaps they would have. But somebody set a precedent that, listen, would you argue if Rav Vayeishev was alive, or if Rav Moshe Feinstein was alive, would you argue with Rav Moshe Feinstein? I wouldn't. Rav Moshe Feinstein said it. I don't care how logical I am, and I don't care what kind of knowledge I have, and how much I understand, I still would not argue with Rav Moshe Feinstein. And I wouldn't argue with Rav Vayeishev, and I wouldn't argue with Rav Chaim Kanievsky, and I wouldn't argue with Rav Shlomo Zalman. I wouldn't argue with any of the Gedolim. Yaakov's the Gadol Hador. Yaakov's the leading sage of the generation. Under normal circumstances, if Yaakov says it, that's it. I don't even have an opinion. Oh, but somebody set a precedent. You're allowed to argue with Yaakov. You're allowed to express an opinion against Yaakov Avinu. You have one opinion, I have another opinion. Who set that precedent? Reuven. Yaakov put his bed in Bilhah's tent, and Reuven comes along, and Reuven takes the bed and says, no, I think it should be in Leah's tent. Oh, you've set a precedent. So now the brothers come along and now decide what we're going to do with Yosef. Should we ask Yaakov? No, not necessarily. Why not? Reuven's already set a precedent. He's an opinion, and we respect his opinion. Well, we're entitled to our opinion too. We're Americans, democracy. We're entitled to our opinion. What does Reuven realize at this point? All of this that's going on right now is because of something that he did 10 years earlier. Now he's got to start fasting because he realizes the ramifications of what he's done. That means sometimes in life you do something, and it's only later on in life that you see what the ramifications are. Like a father who's in shul, and he sees his kid talking to a friend. He sees his son who's 17 years old, or 14 years old, is schmoozing with his friend during davening. And the father, where did the kid get an idea to do that? Because when you brought him to shul when he was 6 years old, and he sat next to you nicely in shul, but he noticed you were schmoozing with your friend in shul. So he didn't see any ramifications besides the fact that you shouldn't have been doing it. Now where are now you see the ramifications. Or when your son is married, and one day you see your son yelling at his wife, and you're wondering, why did a kid? What kind of behavior? Well, who yells at a wife? The kid looks at you and goes, you. Saw you yell at your wife, so why shouldn't he yell at his wife? Right? And your son who cheats his partner in business. Because you didn't know that years ago when you cheated your partner in business, your son was listening to the phone call. And he was hearing the discussion with your wife when she said, I don't think it's a good idea. I really think you should do that. I don't think that's honest. I don't think that's right. And your son saw it. And then years later, he cheated. So now you got to do tshuva, not because, what's you Reuven not doing tshuva for the original? I'm sure he did tshuva back then already. 10 years later, he's got a new tshuva. How do you like that? Because now he sees the effect of what he did 10 years earlier. Frightening idea. frightening idea. It's a brilliant insight. That Reuven, now he's doing tshuva, because now he sees the ramification of what he did 10 years earlier. That's why Reuven's doing tshuva now. Okay? Now, so Yosef gets sold. And the brothers go, and on the next page they slaughter a goat. And they decide they're going to have to go to Yaakov Avinu. Now take a look at what they say to Yaakov Avinu. Why did they use a goat? Top of page 206. Vayichu es ksones Yosef, vayishchatu seir izi, vayitpelu es tones badam. They slaughter it and they dip it in blood. And they send it over to their fathers. Vayishalchu es ksones apasav vayaviu el avihem, vayomru zos matzonu. Haker na haksones bin chahiim lo. Take a look. Is this your son's? How does he call it? So what does he call it? A tunic. Is that his tunic or not? A tunic. Is that his tunic? Is that the ksonos or not? Part of that message is, hey, Dad, what caused all this trouble? Take a look. Recognize this tunic. This tunic is really the source of all the trouble here, because you gave this to you favored him. But they also use the goat's blood. Why did they use goat's blood? Why do you use goat's blood? There's a little bit of a preemptive defense here. Let's say Yaakov smells out the whole thing. And let's say Yaakov, he catches them in the deception. There's a fallback position here. You're lying to me? You said you killed him and you dip a goat's blood. Dad, we know somebody else who deceived using a goat. Right? Sometimes in life you need to deceive, and we have precedent over here using deception with a goat, right? So in case Yaakov does get through it over here, that's the goat's blood. Now we'll talk about that in a second. But Yaakov, then the Torah says he refuses to be comforted, and there's a medrash over here that Yaakov sent out. He didn't believe them. Yaakov was very, very, the whole thing, he wasn't quite sure they're telling the truth. There was a certain amount of skepticism on his part. And Yaakov said, well, if Yosef is killed, Toraf Yosef. Yosef has been killed, and you'll notice very, very important lesson here. Take a look at Yaakov's reaction. Pasuk Lamed Gimel on page 206. Vayakira. He recognizes it. He recognizes the tunic. 5 lines on the top. Vayomer ksones beni. It's the tunic of my son. Chaya ra achalasu. He's been eaten by a wild animal. Toraf Yosef. Yosef has been ripped apart. Now imagine a father at this point, a father who's just seen this and it's his beloved son. What kind of reaction would you expect this to be? What tone would you use over here? You imagine that what? Yaakov's probably screaming. He's probably yelling. He's hysterical, right? Where do we ever find somebody yelling? Where do we find somebody yelling? Esav. When he finds out that Yitzchak gave the bracha to Yaakov, Esav yells, says Vayitzak. Esav yells. He gives a bellow. He gives a yell. Look at Yaakov at the worst moment of his life. Vayomer, total control. Vayomer, he says it. It doesn't say Vayitzak. You'd expect to hear Yaakov yelling. A Jew never loses control. You never loses control. When Rav Aaron Cutler was nifter, the Gadol Ador, so he had Talmidim in the room. The Talmidim started crying. They started wailing. When Rav Aaron was nifter, the last time they were in the hospital, Rav Aaron Cutler, he started wailing. His wife walked over and closed the hospital room door so nobody should be bothered by the wailing. A Jew doesn't, we don't cut ourselves up. There's a halach in the Torah, and a Jew's in mourning. They don't slash themselves. I once saw a picture when Ayatollah Khomeini, remember Ayatollah Khomeini? He should rest in pieces. So Ayatollah Khomeini, Olav Hashnabel, so when he died, so they had this massive, massive funeral in Iran. He died, and it was really a happy funeral because they got this mob. There was 1 million frenzied Iranians and they had to get his body to the grave. So they actually couldn't. Do you remember this? They had a helicopter. They brought in a helicopter. They put the body on a helicopter. 8 guys on a helicopter. They had a helicopter over the mob to the grave, and by the time they landed, the mob had started turning and they were running towards them. So you got 8 guys with 1 million Iranians running towards you. So they grabbed the body and started running towards the grave. And at the last moment, they dropped the body. This is their holy leader. They dropped the body and then just kind of shoveled him into the grave, plop, right, and got into the helicopter. And they what do you call it? They helicoptered away. So I remember in Time magazine, they had a picture of this funeral. You have these Iranian women with blood coming down the sides of their face because they'd cut themselves with glass. They cut themselves in mourning. Torah says you don't do that. Jews don't do that. Even mourning has to be controlled. 7 days, 30 days, a year, finish, onwards. Move on, go on with it, right? We don't, obviously it hurts, obviously it's painful, but you don't, it's got to be Yaakov Avinu, Vayomer. He doesn't scream, he says it, number one. Number two, Rebbe Chanan Wasserman asks the following question. Why is it, of all, the Gemara says, a lie, the word sheker, each letter in the word sheker comes to a point, whereas each word in the letter in the word emes has a firm foundation. And the Gemara says, because emes endures, sheker will never endure. So Rebbe Chanan Wasserman asks, the biggest lie in history is blood libels. What's a blood libel? Jews killed a Christian child and used the blood for the Pesach matzahs. Right? That's always been the lie. That's always been the accusation of the blood libel. And it's a lie. First of all, Jews don't eat blood. Jews don't kill. And certainly of all things, Pesach matzahs, which are the thing that we are most careful with. Have you ever been in a matzah baking factory? Look on a box of matzah. What does it say? Ingredients: flour, water. That's it. There's no emulsifiers and no preservative, no nothing. Flour, water. Of all the funny, the ridiculous lies that Jews killed the Christian child to use the blood and use the blood for the Pesach. So if you tell me they use the blood for cholent, all right, a lot of stuff goes into cholent. We don't even know what's in there. If you ever miss your wallet, if you're ever missing your wallet for a couple of days, you don't know what she tossed in there. There might have been, oh, this is a tough piece of meat in here. No, that's your wallet. And cholent, it's got like a little orange color to it sometimes, a little flavoring, who knows what they put in. Maybe it's a little blood there. If they would have said that, okay. In the matzahs, of all the ridiculous accusations, Rebbe Chanan Wasserman says, why is it that in this, where the last blood libel was? I think in the 50s in Russia, there was a blood libel. And there's always been the same accusation. Says Rebbe Chanan Wasserman, why is this ridiculous accusation managed to persevere for so long? Says the brothers, when they lied to Yosef by using a lie, they released an energy into the Bria that this lie is going to persevere. How do you like that? That's what Rebbe Chanan Wasserman writes. That the blood libels who should not have gone on this long, maybe perhaps never, the most ridiculous lie is because the brothers tried to deceive Yaakov Avinu with this. With the goat skins, so with the blood. So the Medrash says at this point, the Medrash says everybody's depressed. Yaakov is depressed because he thinks Yaakov is broken. Yaakov is broken. He's in a state of mourning because he thinks Yosef's been killed. The brothers are depressed because they didn't realize how bad Yaakov would take it. Yosef's depressed because he's being sold down. He's going off to Egypt. There's actually a medrash that says Yaakov sent the brothers out. The medrash says he sent the brothers out to go see if maybe they could find Yosef, find the body, find something, and find the animal that killed him. So they go out and they find a wolf. And they grab this wolf, they bring the wolf to Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu says to the wolf, why did you kill my son? And the wolf starts talking. And the wolf says to Yaakov Avinu, I promise you I didn't kill your son. I've been searching for my son as well. I've been looking all over the place, and all of a sudden your brothers grabbed me. And Yaakov thought this the Medrash says the wolf actually spoke. Then the Medrash says Yaakov took some stones, and I think some sticks, and he wrote each name of the Shevet on the sticks and on the stones, and he tried to get them all to bow to the first name, to Reuven, to Shimon. They wouldn't bow. All of a sudden they bowed to Yosef. Yosef's stick, which Yaakov is sensing, There's something going on here. I'm not so sure the story is true. That's what Yaakov is sensing. But at the end of the day, for the available evidence, the brothers have told him that Yosef's been killed. So everybody's depressed. Yaakov's depressed, the brother is depressed, Yosef is depressed. And while it's all bleak and depressed, what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu do? He plants the seeds for Mashiach. While this is all going on, and this is the lesson for us, no matter how bleak things look, and no matter how depressed things are, because look at the very next section. The whole story of Yehuda and Tamar. Going to get to the whole story now of Yehuda, his daughter-in-law. I don't want to go through reading through all the psukim, but what's going to happen is Yehuda gets married to a woman, and he has 3 sons. And the first 2 sons, the first son marries a woman named Tamar, and he doesn't want to get her pregnant, so he wastes his seed, and then he dies. Then the second son takes over for Yibum, and he marries this woman named Tamar, and he also does not want to create a name, promote his brother's name, so he dies. Then there's a third son, and Yehuda decides he doesn't want the third son to marry her because maybe she's going to die. And then Yehuda's wife dies. And one day Yehuda is walking around, and there's a harlot at the crossroads, which is Tamar, who has now covered her face up. And so she hasn't covered her face now. The Gemara says she covered her face when she was his daughter-in-law. He never saw what his daughter-in-law looked like. And all of a sudden there's this harlot on the crossroads, and Yehuda feels a sudden supernatural urge, which the Medrash says he was pushed by a malach. Can't use that excuse, boys. That was a one-timer, right? You can't say, well, what happened? The angel got me, right? That was a one-off for Yehuda. And not only that, the Medrash says that he met her, and he asked her if she's married. He asked her if she's a nida. He asked her if she's been to the mikveh. Everything was taken care of. And the commentators point out, look at the irony. Look at the irony here. There's a test for Yosef, and there's a test for Yehuda. And remember, this is one of those areas where that Mashiach is going to come out of here. So as dodgy as the entire thing looks, at the end of the day, with hindsight, it was perfectly acceptable. And then when Yehuda finds out it's his daughter-in-law, so then there's one opinion that they stayed married together. And from there, her pregnancy, she gets pregnant from Yehuda, and that comes Peretz, and from Peretz comes the Messianic line. That's the story overall. What's remarkable is, what was Yosef's test, which we'll see in a second. Yosef has the test that the woman wants, and he manages to resist. His test was, will he be able to resist? What's Yehuda's test? Yehuda, at his level, his test was, will he accept the invitation? That was his test. The opposite test of Yosef. I mean, sometimes in life there's a test. You say, there's a temptation to do something, and you're supposed to say no. And there are other times in life where your temptation is not to do something, and you have to get up and do it. And Yehuda overcomes. So the Medrash says, but for Yehuda, this is not suitable. Yehuda, at his level, we're talking about one of the Shvatim over here. The answer is the Malach pushed him. The Malach pushed Yehuda into doing this. Now, what's bothering you?
It's just that it doesn't feel like there's much of a question there with Yehuda. He had no choice.
Right, but the irony is that if you would have asked Yehuda in advance, he would have certainly said, this is not something I want to do. That's what it means. I certainly not something I want to do. Next thing you know, he finds himself doing it. Right? That's just the irony that Yosef, who would want to do something and then has to go. Just the irony that it's exactly the opposite. That's just an irony. You're right. It doesn't sound from the Medrash like it was much of a test because he seems to have had no choice. And we see that it's ratified because Mashiach comes out of this. Yeah, go ahead.
Did Tamar know where Yehuda would be? Was she like looking
to? Yeah, she knows. The Chumash says that she knew that she was told that he's on his way, and that's why she set the trap. Okay, set the trap. She felt that she needs to marry him because she had a premonition that Malchus Beis David is going to come from here. Okay, now go ahead.
Just what happened with Yehuda's third son?
Shayla, we don't know. Shayla never married her. In Yehuda, there's this idea of Yibum which existed. We see from here, even though it wasn't technically Yibum, as we the Ramban, I think the Ramban says the ancients knew the secret that there's something of the next of kin marrying the brother's widow. There was a secret. The Ramban, because this is before the Torah was given. Now, well, I want to show you something. You have to see this inside. If you don't see it inside, you have to see this inside. On page 208. Watch this. Vayehi ba'esahi, top line. Vayered Yehuda me'et echav. Yehuda leaves his brothers. Vayet ad ish adulami ushmo chira. He moves towards a man of Adulam whose name is Chira. Now, the Torah never says who this guy is. And I was bothered by something. Because it sounds like he's an ish adulami. Adulami means it's a place from Adulam. And his name is Chira. Page 208. But you want the pasuk Lamed Ches Aleph. Lamed Ches Aleph. And it sounds like there's something significant about this guy, or at least about the place. Now, I was bothered because I know that this entire chapter, which is what the commentaries say, it's not my idea. The commentaries say, the Medrash says that over here we're producing, while everybody's depressed, Hashem is planting the seeds for Mashiach. And again, the message for us is no matter how hopeless and bleak a situation looks, that from there Mashiach could come out. Right? So we should never give up hope. That's the overriding message. So I knew that this whole thing is all about, it's got the messianic direction in it. Now, I was curious, so I checked. If you look, it says vayet could also mean from the word he planted. He planted seeds, or he moved. Ad ish adulami, till he reached a man of Adulam. So I was very curious. So I picked up a concordancia, which is I think in English it's called a concordance, which tells you where words appear all over Tanakh. I was curious about this word adulam. So I looked it up. It appears in 3 places in Nach. The first place I found it is that Dovid HaMelech, when he was on the run hiding from Shaul, he was hiding in the cave Me'oras Adulam. How do you like that? So if Yehuda is moving till the man of Adulam, that's already an indication that he's moving till the man of Adulam. This whole thing is a moving towards Dovid HaMelech. And there are 2 other places where the word Adulam appears. Both of them neither mention Dovid HaMelech, they mention a king of Adulam. Isn't that interesting? So the word Adulam either appears with David or appears with a king. So this whole thing right here, Vayet Adisha Adulami. Now watch this. But make sure you see the word. Do you see the word Adulami, gentlemen? Yeah. Okay. Ayin, the first ayin, is 70. Does number 70 mean anything to you?
The nations?
David HaMelech lived
70 years.
70 years. The Daled stands for David. Right? The Daled stands for David. A Lamed is 30, which is the age that David HaMelech began his reign. And a Mem Yud stands for Melech Yisrael. Right? He was Lamed when he was Melech Yisrael. So the word Adulami would seem to be an indication here that this entire chapter is to get to this man of Adulam, which is, again, Ayin is 70, Dalet is David, Lamed is 30 when he became Mem Yud, Melech Yisrael. Right? All in a word. Right? Yes?
I just want to ask, why does Yehuda get this merit?
Why does Yehuda get this merit? Why does Yehuda get this merit? Why does Levi get the merit to be the Levi? Why does Zevulun get the merit? He was chosen to be the forerunner. You know, very difficult to know. Why did Moshe Rabbeinu get the merit to be the leader of Jewish people? It was very difficult to answer a question. Why did he get a specific merit?
It singles out Yehuda talking to his brothers before.
He was seen as the leader. Yehuda is the leader from the brother. He was seen as the leader of the brothers, and somehow he's got royal. And that's the best I could do for you.
And the fault lines mostly with him, with Yosef.
That's why it says, Vayered Yehuda, they said to Yehuda, you were the one, had you told us not to do it, we would have listened to you also. And therefore, Rashi said they deposed him, they sent him off. Why questions are hard to answer. You know, why that sort of thing. Yehuda is chosen to be Malchus Beis David. Okay. Now, let's go to Yosef. The Yosef Hurad Mitzrayim, page 212. Lamed Tes Aleph. Okay, so Malchus Beizah Misha, the messianic line has already started. V'Yosef hurad Mitzrayma v'yikneu Potifar Srispar Sarah Tabochim Yishmitzer Biada Yishvaelim Asher Horidu Shama. And Yosef is a very successful person. And the master sees that Yosef is what he called, and Yosef is very handsome. Then, in Pasuk Zayin, on page, the trouble starts. Vayhi achar hadvorim ha'ila, v'tisa eshes adona v'seineh el Yosef, v'tomer shichva imi. She raises her eyes to Yosef. Could be she gestured with her eyes. It could be she said it openly. But the message was clear. She's telling Yosef she wants to sit with him. And then the next word is vayima'en. Now, if you read this in the Torah, you'll see there's a shalshalis over the word vayima'en. Vayima'en, which there are three indications here. Number one, it was a difficult refusal. Not so easy. And the Medrash there before should say that I think it's a Midrashic source that says all of the passion that all people in history in the world have felt was Yosef's temptation at that moment. Yeah. Oh, this was difficult. Yeah, but Vayima'en also, Shalshalis is like a chain. It means no. I'm putting a block right over here. It's not going to happen. And the Balei Musar say that when a person is tempted, especially in this area of life, don't start giving excuses first. First thing is no. Now you want to know? Well, I'll tell you. But first is no. Let's make it clear. It's not going to happen. No. Vayima'en. No, absolutely not. So she pursues him. And Yosef was very, very handsome. This woman's name was Zuleika. And there's a medrash that says that her friends saw her, and she was looking, she wasn't looking well. And they said, Zuleika, what's wrong? She said, I got this guy in the house. He is so handsome, and he won't give me the time of day. And it's driving, and I think, come on, Zuleika, you're exaggerating. And there you go, telling stories again. So she invites all the women to the house, and she brings out some vegetables, and she gives them very sharp knives, and she says, please help me peel the vegetables. So they're peeling the vegetables, and then she says, Yosef, he's a servant in the house, and Yosef comes out, and the women are mesmerized by how good-looking Yosef, how handsome he is, and as they're peeling, they start cutting themselves, they start bleeding. Oh, she's a nice lady, this Zuleika. Yeah, she's a real winner. And so Yosef starts, he cuts himself up. They cut themselves because they're so enchanted by how handsome Yosef is. Then they say, okay, now we understand what your problem is. So she's chasing Yosef around, and Yosef refuses her. So I want to tell you an extremely important medrash, very fundamental medrash. The medrash says there was a Roman noblewoman who came to Rav Yossi, Rav Yossi ben Chalafta. I think it was Yossi ben Chalafta. She said, you know, that legend you guys got in the Torah about Yosef running away from Mitzvah, come on, who are you trying to kid? Who are you trying to kid? He's a 17-year-old, red-blooded youth in a den of iniquity called Egypt, and nobody's around to bother him. And you're telling me he walked, come on, what kind of stories are you making up? Right? Kid went off to the university, and what do you call it? He's being chased around by the entire sorority, and he runs away from it. Oh, come on, give me a break. Give me a break. Who are you trying to kid? So what did he answer her? He said, well, let's see what the Torah says. And he points and says to her, look, there's Ruvain. And it says openly that Reuven slept with his father, with Bilhah. It says, Vayishkav is Bilhah. He slept with her. Now, we know it doesn't mean that, but she doesn't know that. But it means that he moved the beds around. But at Reuven, at his level, it's as if he slept with her. So he says to her, look, here's Reuven, who's under his father's jurisdiction, and you'd expect that if he did something wrong, we'd cover up for him, but we don't whitewash for Reuven. And there's Yehuda, a full-grown adult as well as Reuven, and he's under his father's jurisdiction, and he goes with this harlot over here, and we don't whitewash that. we certainly have nothing to be embarrassed about if a 17-year-old who's off at college does something wrong. So we have no reason to whitewash it. So if we tell you that he didn't do it, you can trust us we didn't do it. Because when he did do it, we tell you he did do it. That's what he said. Now, what's remarkable is that if you look at every name in the Torah, pick a name, any name in the Torah. Go ahead, Miguel, any name. It's your big day, big moment. Any name in the Torah of the famous people. Name someone. Is somebody a little more famous, good. You happen to pick a winner the first time. There you go. Pick somebody else. Any of the more famous, prominent names. Aaron. He was involved in the golden calf. He gets criticized. Miriam spoke lashon hara. Moshe Rabbeinu got angry. Avram Avinu, faith, said b'me'eda. Adam Arishon sinned. Noach got drunk. Sarah Imenu, she what do you call it? She was skeptical. Every name that you pick, not every name, and certainly not the names that Miguel picks, but every name in the Torah of the frontliners, Zavulun is on, Zavulun's the second team, right? Everybody on the starting team in the Torah, just about any name in the Torah gets criticized. Yitzchak Avinu, he misreads Esav. Yaakov marries two wives. He gets angry at Rachel. When there's a criticism, we're not hesitant to criticize. The Torah itself points out the flaws. Almost every name all the way through. Pick a name. I'm telling you, it's almost every name all the way through. Which means that if we're not whitewashing. You see this we don't whitewash. And you see this in Gemara also. Because sometimes the Gemara will ask a question, and the Gemara will give an answer, and your reaction is, well, that's a stretch, right? Yeah, but there are plenty of times in the Gemara where there's no answer. Gemara says, tiyuvta the so-and-so tiyuvta. That means when you're knocked out of the box, we tell you it's knocked out. So if we gave you an answer, even if it's a stretch, that means it wasn't as much a stretch as we think. That means it's ratified as a valid answer. Because if it wasn't a valid answer, we'd be the first ones to tell you. And the Gemara will sometimes say about a brisa is quoted, the Gemara will say mishabeshta. It's garbled. It was lost in the tradition. It's inaccurate. That means that the things that we don't say are inaccurate, they're not inaccurate. That's a very important lesson in the Torah. We don't whitewash anything. So if she comes along and if the Torah tells you, if the Gemara says, anyone who says David HaMelech sinned is making a mistake. The whole story with Dovid and Bathsheba, the whole thing looks dodgy. And the Gemara says, if you think that David HaMelech sinned, you're making a mistake. We'd be the first ones to say he made a mistake. We got it all over the place. We're not whitewashing anything. And if there was a flaw, it's not at the level that we think it is. The Gemara says he's making a mistake. If you say David said if you say Shlomo said you made a mistake. So it looks to us, but we don't whitewash anything. You see that Yehuda, we tell you what he did. Reuven, we tell you what he did. And the Torah says every single one of them is taken to task. Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't go into Eretz Yisrael because Moshe Rabbeinu is the greatest man in history and the Torah doesn't whitewash for him. Why not? The answer is because we don't whitewash. So if it tells you that Yosef ran away from her, that means Yosef ran away from her. Okay? So she starts up with him and she says to Yosef, let's sin, and Yosef will not listen. And it says that she tempted him in 1,000,001 ways. And eventually Yosef comes home alone. And on page 216, top, Vatisveseyu bevigdo, leimor shichva, she grabs his garment. Vayazov bigdo biyoda vayana sayetze achutza. He leaves the garment in her hands and he runs outside. Vayana sayetze achutza. We have a pasuk later on when the Jewish people get to the Red Sea. What does it say? What do we say in Hallel? Hayam ra vayanos, hayardein tisav le'achor. Right? Right? Hayam ra'a vayanos. The sea saw and it fled. And Chazal say, why did the sea? Hayam ra'a vayanos. What does it say here? Vayanos vayetze achutza. It was the merit nas mipnei hanas. The sea fled in the merit of the one who fled. Remember the Jewish people had Yosef's bones with them when they were coming? When the Yam Suf saw Yosef's bones, the Yam Suf split. Why? Because in the merit of the fact that Yosef fled over here. Hayam ra'a vayanos. In the merit of Yosef, the sea split. That's how difficult, what's that really telling you? A miracle of the Yam Suf splitting, defying nature at that level, that the sea split, that's what the type of nature that Yosef activated to defy nature over here. And the Bali, one last point here, the Bali Musar say, he left his garment in her hands. So, Yosef was bigger, stronger, he could have overpowered her, and she's got the evidence, right? She's got his garment. Why didn't he just rip it out of her hands and run off? Why didn't he rip it out of her hands? The Bob Busher, you're not going to believe this. The Bob Busher, it's not proper to rip things out of people's hands. This is the evidence, they're going to hold it against you. By the way, there's a medrash that says that they went to court. They were trumped up to all the other women. Zuleika got the other women to join in the accusations. So Potiphar already, he knows his wife. He knows she's not a Beis Yaakov girl. So Potiphar already suspects that, maybe there's a little bit of he knows who his wife is. And so and he knows Yosef, and he suspects he's innocent. So they go to court. The Medrash says that the judge says, bring out the garment. If it's ripped in the front, then chances are he was assaulting her and she ripped it. If it's ripped in the back, that means he's trying to run away and she's still grabbing at him. That's one of it. There's another opinion that they said bring both garments if his garment is ripped or her garment is ripped. I think there was if his garment, why is she ripping at his garment? It's the last thing you do. You push him away. You don't rip at his garment. So they already knew that Yosef was innocent, and that's why they didn't execute him. But to save Potiphar, to save face for Potiphar, because he's a high government official, they throw Yosef into prison. Okay? We'll see tomorrow. Continue tomorrow.